The morning sun peeked through the windows of Atlanta General Hospital as Sarah James rushed through the busy hallways. Her white coat swished with each quick step, and her natural curls were neatly tied back in a professional bun. As one of the hospital's most dedicated physical therapists, she always arrived early to review her patient files before starting her day. That morning was different. The head nurse had called her to say they had a new patient who needed immediate attention. Sarah didn't know it yet, but this particular Tuesday would change her life forever. Room 407, Sarah muttered to herself, checking her clipboard one last time. She knocked gently on the door before entering. Inside, she found a man sitting in a wheelchair, looking out the window. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and their eyes met. "Good morning, I'm Sarah James, your physical therapist," she said with her usual warm smile. The man's face lit up, despite the visible cuts and bruises that were still healing. "Marcus Thompson," he replied, his voice strong and clear. "I hope you're ready for a challenge because I've been told I'm not the easiest patient." He said this with such a playful grin that Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Sarah noticed something different about Marcus right away. Unlike many patients who had recently become wheelchair-bound, his eyes didn't show defeat. Instead, they sparkled with determination. She learned from his file that he was a software engineer who had been in a terrible car accident 3 weeks ago. The crash had left him unable to walk, but thankfully, his hands and mind were as sharp as ever. As Sarah began her initial assessment, she discovered that Marcus was unlike any patient she had worked with before. While she checked his mobility, he told her about the coding project he was working on from his hospital bed. "Just because my legs don't work doesn't mean my brain has to stop too," he explained, showing her his laptop filled with complex programming codes. Their first session flew by as Marcus mixed his exercises with stories about his work. He was developing software to help people with disabilities navigate everyday tasks more easily. "The accident gave me a new purpose," he said, wincing slightly as he completed another stretching exercise. "Now I truly understand what people like me need." Sarah found herself looking forward to their sessions more and more. Marcus never complained about the difficult exercises. Instead, he would joke about how his wheels, as he called his wheelchair, make him the fastest patient in the hospital. His laughter was infectious, echoing through the therapy room and making other patients smile too. One day, while helping Marcus with his arm-strengthening exercises, Sarah noticed a photo by his bedside. It showed him standing on a mountain peak, arms raised in victory. "That was me last year," he said, following her gaze. "Mount Rainier. Would you believe I was afraid of heights?" He chuckled, but there was no bitterness in his voice. Life has a funny way of teaching us that our real limitations aren't physical. They're the ones we put in our own minds. Those words stuck with Sarah long after her shift ended. She had worked with many patients over the years, but Marcus's outlook on life touched something deep within her. He didn't see his wheelchair as an end to his dreams, but as a new beginning. During their therapy sessions, Sarah learned that Marcus was not just smart and determined. He was kind too. He'd always asked about her day and remembered small details she mentioned, like her mother's upcoming birthday or her younger sister's college graduation. He treated every nurse, doctor, and cleaning staff member with the same respect he showed her. As the weeks passed, Sarah realized she was spending more time in room 407 than necessary. She would find excuses to check on his progress or bring him updates about other patients he had befriended during his therapy sessions. Her colleagues noticed how her face brightened whenever she talked about her determined patient in room 407. Sarah knew it wasn't professional to have feelings for a patient, but there was something special about Marcus that went beyond his condition. It wasn't just his handsome face or his brilliant mind. It was his spirit, his determination to turn his tragedy into an opportunity to help others. What started as a routine patient assessment was slowly turning into something neither of them had expected. But Sarah kept these thoughts to herself, maintaining her professional demeanor even as her heart told her that Marcus Thompson was someone extraordinary. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of an amazing journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, ability, and the power of the human spirit. 3 months after their first meeting, Sarah sat in her car outside the hospital, staring at her phone. Marcus had been discharged 2 weeks ago, but they had stayed in touch. Today, he had sent her a text that made her heart race. "Would you like to have coffee with me? Not as your patient, but as someone who'd really like to get to know you better." Sarah's finger hovered over the screen. As a physical therapist, she knew the rules about dating former patients. The mandatory waiting period had passed, but that wasn't what made her hesitate. It was the voice of her mother ringing in her ears from their conversation last night. A disabled man? Sarah, think about your future. Her mother had said during their weekly phone call, "What about children? What about taking care of him? You're a successful black woman with so many options ahead of you." Sarah had hung up the phone feeling angry and confused. She thought society had moved past such prejudices, but here they were coming from her own family. Looking at Marcus's message again, she remembered his bright smile and brilliant mind. With determined fingers, she typed yes and pressed send. Their first date was at a small coffee shop near the hospital. Sarah arrived early, watching through the window as Marcus skillfully maneuvered his wheelchair through the door. He had dressed up in a crisp blue shirt that matched his eyes, and his smile lit up the whole room when he saw her. "I was worried you might say no," Marcus admitted as they settled at a table. "I know this isn't conventional." Sarah stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "What's conventional anyway? My grandparents were told their marriage wouldn't work because of their skin color. Look how wrong those people were." Their conversation flowed easily, just as it had during therapy sessions, but now they could talk about personal things. Marcus told her about growing up in a small town, his passion for technology, and his dreams of making the world more accessible for everyone. Sarah shared stories about her family, her journey through medical school, and her love for helping others heal. As weeks passed, they faced more challenges. At a restaurant, a waiter spoke only to Sarah, asking her if he needed help with the menu. Marcus handled it with grace, but Sarah saw the hurt in his eyes. Another time, at a mall, an elderly woman told Sarah she was such a saint for being with Marcus, as if love couldn't exist without pity. These incidents made Marcus question their relationship one evening as they sat in his adapted van outside Sarah's apartment. "You deserve someone who can dance with you, who won't make people stare when we're out together," he said quietly. Sarah felt anger rise in her chest. "Marcus Thompson, look at me," she demanded. He turned, surprised by her tone. "Do you think I care what people think? My father told me that love isn't about what other people see. It's about what you feel in your heart. And my heart has never been more sure about anything." That night changed something between them. Marcus began sharing more of his world with Sarah. He showed her his home office, where he was developing apps for people with disabilities. She watched in amazement as he demonstrated how technology could bridge gaps and create independence. Sarah's family slowly began to change their minds too. It started when Marcus helped Sarah's younger brother with coding homework over video chat. Then, during a family dinner, he charmed her skeptical aunts with his knowledge of their favorite TV shows and his genuine interest in their stories. One evening, as they watched the sunset from Marcus's adapted balcony, Sarah realized something important. She had always thought she was strong, independent, and open-minded, but loving Marcus had made her even stronger. He hadn't just broken down barriers in technology. He had helped break down the invisible walls of prejudice in her own heart. What some people saw as limitations, Sarah now saw as opportunities for creativity and growth. When Marcus cooked dinner for her using his specially adapted kitchen, or when they found unique ways to dance together in his wheelchair, she discovered that love didn't need to follow anyone else's rules. As their relationship deepened, Sarah began to understand that true love wasn't about ability or disability, race or background. It was about two hearts connecting, two minds understanding each other, and two souls refusing to let society's narrow views define their happiness. Spring turned to summer, and Sarah and Marcus's love grew stronger with each passing day. Their weekend dates became the highlight of their week, even though they weren't like typical couples outings. Instead of hiking trails, they explored accessible gardens. Rather than dancing at clubs, they had private dance parties in Marcus's living room, where he would spin his wheelchair in perfect time to the music while Sarah danced around him. One hot Saturday morning, Sarah arrived at Marcus's apartment to find him surrounded by computer screens and empty coffee cups. He had been working all night on a new project. His eyes were tired but excited as he waved her over. "Look at this," he said, pointing to one of the screens. "I call it Voice Wings. It's an app that lets people control their entire home with just their voice." He demonstrated by speaking into his phone, and across the room, lights dimmed, Music started playing, and the air conditioning adjusted itself. Sarah watched in amazement as Marcus showed her more features. I got the idea from Tommy, he explained, referring to a quadriplegic patient they had met during his hospital stay. He can't move his arms or legs, but his voice is strong. With this, he could be independent in his own home. What impressed Sarah most wasn't just the technology, but how Marcus used his own challenges to understand what others needed. When he talked about his work, his disability seemed to disappear. His mind soared freely, creating solutions that could help thousands of people. Their love wasn't just about romance, it was about growth. Sarah found herself learning more about technology and accessibility issues. Meanwhile, Marcus started joining her at physical therapy conferences, sharing his perspective as both a developer and someone with a disability. One evening, they ordered takeout and sat on Marcus's balcony. The city lights twinkled below them like earthbound stars. Marcus had just finished telling her about a major tech company showing interest in his Voice Wings app. You know what's funny? Sarah said, putting down her chopsticks. When my mom first heard about us dating, she worried you wouldn't be able to provide for a family. She shook her head, smiling. Now look at you, about to become a tech star. Marcus reached for her hand. Everything I've achieved is because of you, Sarah. Your love gave me the confidence to dream bigger than my wheelchair. That's not true, Sarah replied firmly. You always had this brilliance in you. I just got to be the lucky woman who sees it up close every day. Their relationship wasn't without its funny moments, too. Like the time they tried cooking together in Marcus's adapted kitchen, and Sarah couldn't figure out how to use the special equipment. Marcus ended up teaching her, laughing as she struggled with tools that he now used effortlessly. Or the day they went shopping, and Marcus insisted on carrying Sarah's bags on his wheelchair. My chariot is at your service, my lady, he had joked, making her giggle like a teenager. The summer brought more opportunities for them both. Sarah was promoted to head of the physical therapy department, while Marcus's app caught the attention of investors. During a presentation to a group of tech entrepreneurs, Marcus proudly pointed out Sarah in the audience. Behind every successful project is a story, he told the crowd. Mine began in a hospital room where a beautiful physical therapist showed me that my wheelchair wasn't the end of my journey. It was just the beginning of a new one. That night, as they celebrated his successful presentation at their favorite restaurant, Sarah looked at Marcus and saw their future clearly. She saw past the wheelchair, past the challenges, past what others might think. She saw a brilliant man who had turned his adversity into opportunity, which shown her that love had no boundaries. As they shared a dessert, Marcus told her about his plans to expand his accessibility software company. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he described how he wanted to help more people with disabilities live independently. You're going to change the world, Sarah said softly. Marcus squeezed her hand. We already have, he replied. Every time someone sees us together and realizes that love doesn't need legs to stand strong, we're changing the world, one heart at a time. The day Sarah and Marcus decided to meet both families together started with butterflies in their stomachs. Sarah's parents, Michael and Diana James, owned a successful chain of beauty supply stores in Atlanta. They had arranged a dinner at their spacious home, inviting Marcus's parents, Robert and Linda Thompson, to join them. Sarah spent the morning helping her mother prepare dinner, trying to calm her nerves. Diana kept dropping hints about other men from their church who were interested in Sarah. You know, Dr. Williams's son just became a surgeon, she said, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. Mom, Sarah said firmly, Marcus is the one I love. He's brilliant, kind, and his company is about to launch a revolutionary app. Why can't you see past his wheelchair? Diana put down her knife and looked at her daughter. I just want life to be easier for you, baby. Being a black woman is already hard enough in this world. Before Sarah could respond, the doorbell rang. Marcus arrived with his parents, navigating his wheelchair up the ramp Sarah's father had reluctantly installed last week. Robert Thompson, a tall man with graying hair, pushed a bottle of expensive wine into Michael James's hands as a peace offering. The first few minutes were awkward. Linda Thompson kept commenting on how exotic the food looked, even though it was just traditional soul food. Diana's smile became more forced with each comment. Marcus squeezed Sarah's hand under the table, giving her strength. So, Michael James said after they were seated, Marcus, how exactly do you plan to provide for my daughter? The question hung heavy in the air. Marcus straightened in his wheelchair. Sir, my software company just received major investment funding. We're launching an app that helps people with disabilities live independently. Sarah's been a huge part of its development, testing it with her patients. That's interesting, Linda Thompson interjected. But surely Sarah won't want to be a caretaker for the rest of her life. She looked at her son apologetically. You know what I mean, dear. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but Marcus spoke first. Mom, Sarah isn't my caretaker. She's my partner. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself, my home, and my business. My wheelchair doesn't define what I can offer as a husband. Robert Thompson cleared his throat. You have to admit, son, it's unusual. We just want to make sure you both understand what you're getting into. Unusual? Sarah's voice was quiet but firm, like when people told Grandma and Grandpa their marriage wouldn't work because of their color. We're still having these conversations in 2024. Diana looked at her daughter, seeing the determination in her eyes. It reminded her of herself when she fought to start her first store against everyone who said a black woman couldn't succeed in business. The tension broke unexpectedly when Marcus's phone buzzed. He apologized and checked it quickly, then broke into a huge smile. I'm sorry, but I have to share this. Our app just got approved by the major tech stores. We launch next week. Michael James, who had been quiet for a while, leaned forward. Tell me more about this business of yours, young man. As Marcus explained his company's mission and showed the app's features on his phone, the atmosphere began to change. Michael, a businessman at heart, found himself impressed by Marcus's clear vision and business plan. Even Linda started to see her son in a new light as he confidently discussed profit projections and market expansion. Later that evening, as the family said goodbye, something had shifted. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Diana hugged Marcus before he left, whispering, "Thank you for loving my daughter." In the car ride home, Marcus turned to Sarah. Well, that was interesting. Sarah laughed, wiping away a few tears. That's one way to put it. But did you see how my dad's face changed when you talked about your company? I think you impressed him. Baby steps, Marcus said, reaching for her hand. Just like in physical therapy, right? Every small movement forward is progress. That night proved that love wasn't just about two people coming together. It was about two families learning to see past their fears and prejudices. It wasn't easy, and there would be more challenges ahead, but Sarah and Marcus had shown their families that true love knows no boundaries, whether they're physical or social. The Atlanta Tech Conference was the biggest event of the year, and Marcus's company had been chosen as one of the main presenters. Sarah sat in the front row, wearing her favorite blue dress, watching as Marcus prepared to take the stage. His wheelchair had been decorated with small lights that matched the stage lighting, making it look more like a throne than a medical device. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. Please welcome Marcus Thompson, CEO of Adaptive Solutions. The crowd applauded as Marcus smoothly wheeled himself onto the stage. Sarah noticed he seemed more nervous than usual, but she thought it was just because of the presentation. She had no idea what was really about to happen. Good morning, everyone, Marcus began, his voice strong and clear. 3 years ago, I was in a car accident that put me in this wheelchair. Many people thought my life was over. But sometimes, what looks like an ending is actually a beautiful beginning. The huge screen behind him lit up, showing pictures of his journey. There he was in the hospital, then working on his first app, and finally launching his company. Sarah's heart swelled with pride as she watched the audience lean forward, captivated by his story. My accident taught me that technology can bridge any gap, break down any barrier, Marcus continued. Today, I'm excited to show you our newest creation, the Freedom app. He demonstrated how the app could control home devices, call for help, and even guide wheelchair users to accessible routes in any city. The audience was amazed. People started recording with their phones as Marcus showed more features. Even the tech journalists in the crowd were nodding impressively. But Marcus wasn't finished. However, he said, his voice becoming softer, the greatest innovation in my life wasn't something I created. It was something I found. He turned his wheelchair toward Sarah, or rather, someone who found me. Sarah's heart started beating faster. This wasn't part of the presentation they had practiced. Sarah James, Marcus said, wheeling closer to the edge of the stage. Could you join me up here? With shaking legs, Sarah walked up the ramp to the stage. The spotlight followed her, and she could hear whispers of excitement from the crowd. This amazing woman was my physical therapist after my accident, Marcus told the audience. But she became so much more. She saw past my wheelchair and into my heart. She taught me that love has no limitations. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black box. The audience gasped. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as happy tears started forming in her eyes. I may not be able to get down on one knee, Marcus said, his voice full of emotion, but my heart can still bow before you. Sarah, you've shown me that true love isn't about walking together. It's about moving forward together, no matter how we move. He opened the box, revealing a beautiful ring with a sparkling diamond. Will you marry me? The whole conference hall went silent, waiting for Sarah's answer. She looked at Marcus, seeing not his wheelchair but his loving eyes, his brilliant mind, and his beautiful soul. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with joy. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, and Sarah leaned down to kiss him. The huge screens showed their happy faces, and soon their phones started buzzing with notifications as their proposal went viral on social media. Later that evening, at a celebration dinner with both their families, Sarah couldn't stop looking at her ring. Marcus had designed it himself, with a special pattern that matched the constellation visible on the night they had their first date. I love you, she whispered to him as their families chatted happily around them, not because of what you can or can't do, but because of who you are. Marcus smiled, holding her hand. And I love you for seeing me, really seeing me, when others only saw my wheelchair. As they celebrated late into the night, their story was already spreading across the internet, touching hearts and changing minds about what love, disability, and determination really meant. But for Sarah and Marcus, the only thing that mattered was that they had found each other, and their greatest adventure was just beginning. The months following their viral proposal flew by in a whirlwind of wedding preparations and unexpected fame. Sarah and Marcus's engagement video had touched millions of hearts worldwide, making them overnight symbols of love without boundaries. Their inbox was flooded with messages from other couples facing similar challenges, all finding hope in their story. One sunny Saturday morning, Sarah and Marcus sat in their favorite coffee shop, surrounded by wedding magazines and planning books. The owner, Maria, had specially modified a table to accommodate Marcus's wheelchair perfectly. So, Sarah said, checking their growing to-do list, we found the accessible venue, but we still need to figure out the dance floor situation. Marcus smiled mysteriously. Don't worry about the dance floor. I have something special planned for that. There was a twinkle in his eye that Sarah had learned meant he was up to something, but she knew better than to ask too many questions. Their wedding planning took an unexpected turn when a popular wedding magazine asked to feature their story. The reporter, Lisa Chen, spent a day following them around as they visited vendors and made arrangements. What's the biggest challenge in planning your wedding? Lisa asked, notebook in hand. Sarah and Marcus looked at each other and laughed. Finding a cake we both like, they said in unison. The real challenges, making sure everything was wheelchair accessible, dealing with curious stares, handling family tensions, seemed small compared to their joy in being together. But not everything was smooth sailing. One afternoon, they visited a high-end wedding dress boutique. The owner took one look at Marcus and started speaking only to Sarah, as if he wasn't there. You know, dear, the owner said in a loud whisper, we usually do private fittings. The groom doesn't need to be here. Sarah stood up straight, her voice firm but kind. My fiancé has excellent taste, and we make decisions together. If that's a problem, we'll take our business elsewhere. They left the boutique hand in hand and found a lovely small shop owned by a woman whose brother used a wheelchair. She helped Sarah find the perfect dress while actively including Marcus in the conversation. The dress was beautiful, with special modifications that would make their first dance easier. As their wedding date approached, the media attention grew. Marcus's company had launched several new accessibility apps, and their love story had become part of his brand's success. But with the attention came pressure. Comment sections filled with both support and criticism. Some called their relationship inspiring, while others accused them of seeking attention. Maybe we should have had a smaller wedding, Sarah said one evening after reading some particularly harsh comments. Marcus took her hand. Our love isn't just about us anymore. Every time someone sees us together, we're showing the world that love has no limits. We're giving hope to other couples who might be afraid to follow their hearts. Their families, who had initially been skeptical, now threw themselves into the wedding preparations. Sarah's mother, Diana, surprised them by taking a course in planning accessible events. Marcus's parents, Robert and Linda, worked hard to make their rehearsal dinner venue completely wheelchair-friendly. One day, while they were addressing invitations, Marcus received an email that made him emotional. It was from a young man in a wheelchair who had been afraid to date. After seeing Marcus and Sarah's story, he had found the courage to ask out his crush, and they were now dating. "See," Sarah said, wiping away Marcus's tears. "Your bravery is changing lives." The weeks before the wedding became a beautiful chaos of final fittings, venue checks, and family gatherings. Marcus spent mysterious hours away, claiming he was working on a special surprise for the ceremony. Sarah was curious but trusted that whatever he was planning would be perfect. Their wedding website crashed twice from too many visitors, and their registry was filled with gifts from strangers touched by their story. But among all the public attention, Sarah and Marcus kept their focus on what mattered most: their love for each other and the future they would build together. As they sat together one evening, reviewing their vows, Sarah looked at Marcus with tears in her eyes. "I can't wait to be your wife," she said softly. Marcus kissed her hand. "And I can't wait to give you the surprise of a lifetime," he replied with that mysterious smile that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. While Sarah busied herself with wedding preparations, Marcus was keeping the biggest secret of his life. 3 times a week, he would tell Sarah he had late meetings at his company. Instead, he was visiting a special rehabilitation center on the outskirts of Atlanta, where a team of doctors were helping him with an experimental treatment. Dr. Rachel Chen, a specialist in spinal cord injuries, had contacted Marcus after seeing his proposal video go viral. "We're testing a new combination of therapy and technology," she had explained during their first meeting. "With your determination, we might be able to help you stand for short periods." At first, Marcus wasn't sure about keeping secrets from Sarah, but he wanted to give her something magical, something that would show her just how much she had inspired him to never give up. So every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, he worked harder than he ever had before. The rehabilitation center had equipment Marcus had never seen before. Special braces connected to computers helped him practice standing. Physical therapists worked with him for hours, strengthening muscles that hadn't been used since his accident. Every small victory was celebrated: the first time he could move his toes, the day he stood for 10 seconds with support, each moment bringing him closer to his dream. "This isn't about walking again," Marcus explained to Dr. Chen one day, sweat dripping from his forehead after a particularly hard session. "It's about showing Sarah that miracles can happen when you believe in love." The treatment wasn't easy. Some days, Marcus felt so much pain he could barely hide it from Sarah. Other days, he wondered if he was fooling himself. But then he would remember Sarah's face, imagine her expression when he surprised her at their wedding, and find the strength to continue. Marcus's parents were the only ones who knew his secret. His mother, Linda, often drove him to his sessions and waited patiently, knitting a blanket for his and Sarah's future home. She watched her son push through pain and exhaustion, seeing in him the same determination he had shown as a child learning to ride a bike. "Are you sure about this, honey?" she asked one day after a particularly difficult session. "Sarah loves you just as you are." Marcus smiled, still catching his breath. "I know she does, Mom. That's exactly why I want to do this. She believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Now I want to show her that her faith in me wasn't misplaced." As the wedding drew closer, Marcus worked with Dr. Chen to design special braces that would be hidden under his wedding suit. They were lighter and more advanced than regular braces, connected to a small computer that would help him control his movements. The team spent hours adjusting them, making sure they would work perfectly for those few precious minutes during the wedding. 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus had a secret dress rehearsal. With the braces and support bars hidden from view, he practiced the movements he would need. His physical therapy team watched nervously as he slowly pushed himself up from his wheelchair. For 30 seconds, Marcus Thompson stood on his own 2 feet. The room erupted in cheers. Dr. Chen hugged him, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Marcus. You really did it. But Marcus knew the real challenge was still ahead. Standing in the rehabilitation center was one thing. Standing in front of everyone at his wedding would be different. He practiced every day, building his strength and confidence, always thinking of Sarah's smile. The night before the wedding, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, looking at a picture of Sarah on his phone. His muscles ached from the final practice session, but his heart was full of excitement. Tomorrow, he would give Sarah the surprise of her life. Not because she needed him to stand, but because she had taught him that love could make anything possible. He sent Sarah a text. "Can't wait to marry you tomorrow, beautiful." Her reply came quickly. "I love you so much. Thank you for choosing me." Marcus smiled, touching the braces hidden in his closet. "No," he whispered to himself. "Thank you for giving me the strength to stand again, in more ways than one." The wedding day dawned bright and beautiful. The venue, a modern glass-walled garden chapel, was filled with flowers and soft music. Guests from around the world had come to witness this special moment: families, friends, and even strangers who had been touched by their story. Sarah stood in the bridal room, wearing her gorgeous white dress that sparkled with tiny crystals. Her mother, Diana, wiped away tears as she adjusted her daughter's veil. "You look like an angel," Diana whispered, finally understanding that her daughter's love story was more beautiful than any traditional romance she had imagined for her. Meanwhile, in another room, Marcus was getting ready with his father's help. Hidden beneath his black tuxedo were the special braces Dr. Chen had designed. His heart was racing with anticipation, but his face remained calm. "Are you ready, son?" his father asked, knowing the full weight of that question. Marcus nodded. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." The ceremony began. Marcus wheeled himself to the altar first, looking handsome and confident in his decorated wheelchair. The guests smiled, some already dabbing their eyes, having no idea about the surprise that was coming. When the music changed to the wedding march, everyone stood. Sarah appeared at the entrance, and the whole room gasped. She was breathtaking. Her father walked beside her, and her smile lit up the entire chapel. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as he watched his bride approach. The ceremony was beautiful. They had written their own vows, speaking of love that overcame all barriers. When Sarah talked about how Marcus had shown her true strength, he squeezed her hands, knowing what was about to happen. After they exchanged rings, the minister pronounced them husband and wife. Their kiss was met with cheerful applause. But Marcus wasn't done yet. "Before we continue," he said into the microphone, his voice strong and clear, "I have a special surprise for my wife." The room went quiet. Sarah looked at him curiously. Marcus pressed a hidden button on his wheelchair, and soft music began to play, their favorite song. "Sarah," he said, looking up at her with eyes full of love, "you've always said that love has no limitations. Today, I want to show you just how right you are." Slowly, Marcus moved his hands to the arms of his wheelchair. Dr. Chen and his physical therapy team stood quietly at the back of the room, watching nervously. Sarah's eyes widened as she realized something was happening. With careful, deliberate movements, Marcus began to push himself up. The hidden braces under his suit whirred softly, supporting his legs. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as Marcus, her husband who hadn't stood in 3 years, rose from his wheelchair. The room erupted in gasps and cries of joy. Sarah was crying, but her smile was brighter than the sun. Marcus stood before her, supported by the special braces but standing nonetheless. "May I have this dance?" he asked, holding out his hand. Through her tears, Sarah stepped forward and took his hand. The music swelled as they began to sway together. It wasn't a traditional dance. Marcus couldn't move much, but it was their dance, and it was perfect. "How?" Sarah whispered as they moved slowly together. "When did you?" "I've been practicing for months," Marcus said softly. "Every time you thought I was working late, I was learning to stand again. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to share this moment with you." Their guests watched in amazed silence as the couple shared their first dance. Some were filming, others were crying, but everyone felt the power of the moment. This wasn't just about a man standing up. It was about love breaking down every barrier, defying every limitation. After a minute, Marcus had to sit back down, but Sarah sat right in his lap, kissing him through happy tears. Their love story, which had already inspired millions, had just added another magical chapter. As they looked out at their cheering friends and family, Sarah and Marcus knew that their journey was just beginning. They had shown the world that true love knows no boundaries, that miracles happen every day, and that sometimes the greatest gifts come in unexpected packages. Their wedding video would go viral again, touching even more hearts around the world. But for Sarah and Marcus, the only thing that mattered was that they had found each other, believed in each other, and proved that love could make the impossible possible.